Hi everybody, I'm Dr. John Douillard. Welcome to LifeSpa.com, where we prove the ancient medical wisdom of Ayurveda with modern science. And today I want to talk about something really special and really important, and it's about spontaneous remissions, particularly with folks who had cancer or have cancer, and some of the science behind how that could take place. Is it placebo? Is it spontaneous remissions? What's really happening there? You know, when I came back from India in 1986, I was invited to co-direct Deepak Chopra Center in Massachusetts. He had just finished writing the book, which was really a book about spontaneous remissions. And we had many cancer patients come again and again and again for Ayurvedic treatments and detoxification with cancer. Some of them took the medications, the Western medications, and some of them did nothing but Ayurveda. Some of them had just the gamut of all different possible ways that they addressed their cancer. But what I found again and again and again was that the folks who actually did the best and lived the longest and had spontaneous remissions and reversed their cancer, it didn't really seem to matter if they did chemo or not chemo or Ayurveda or not, or whatever they did. It was the mindset. It was they had this mindset that that this cancer diagnosis they would tell me was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was going down a road where I was just going 90 miles an hour, just a workaholic, pushing, trying to make life happen. Sort of got divorced, ruined my family. Nobody in my family likes me, just pushing. And that cancer diagnosis stopped them in their tracks. They completely did a 180 and they went down the life of loving, being giving, being kind, being caring. Creating a different hormonal experience in their body, a hormone called oxytocin, which is the longevity hormone, the giving hormone, the loving, caring, bonding hormone. And when you actually start loving and giving and caring and being kind to people, the chemistry changes. Now, this was backed up by research done by a researcher. Her name was Candace Pert. She actually came to our clinic. I got to meet her, one of the honors of my life, because she did groundbreaking research in her book called The Molecules of Emotion. And she found out that there are molecules of emotion stored in your body, stored in your muscle cells, stored in different parts of your brain, stored in different around your sensory areas. So all these different areas that held on to these molecules of emotion. She also found that the brain is directly linked in communication with the nervous system, which is directly linked and in communication with the immune system. And when you have a thought or a stress, that neuropeptides are carrying these molecules of emotion to the brain, to the nervous system, and to your immune system, and can have a direct effect on the function of your immune system. And that was the foundational work for a field now today called psychoneuroimmunology, which is where your mindset can have such a powerful effect on your body, your health, your longevity, your immunity, right? So we all know that when you have a diagnosis of cancer, the C word, it's just a devastating kind of experience, right? You just can't even imagine that diagnosis. Well, the science shows that when you have that diagnosis, it has an impact, according to Candace Pert's work, on your mind, your body, your immunity, and your immune system just starts to crash. Your nervous system is depressed. That creates an impact on a depressed immune system. It depresses every function of every cell in your body. And so how do we deal with that? So if you kind of dive into the Western science for a second, we know that a lack of cellular communication is one of the things that they recognize as the underlying cause of cancer. The cells aren't communicating anymore. They're functioning independently as opposed to a part of the whole, right? Where the whole is, more powerful than some of the parts. But when the body starts to function more as parts and not interacting with each other, This is the problem. The intelligence of the whole is compromised. Ayurveda called this the mistake of the intellect, or pragya prad, where the mind or the cells or the parts of the body forget that they're part of the whole. And they recognize the whole to be an underlying field of intelligence or consciousness. So when the consciousness, the fields, the quantum fields of intelligence, which even Einstein talked about, become matter, become the body, and the body starts to function independent of those fields, this is a problem. The cells go rogue. They start functioning just to stay alive and survive without being connected to the whole. So how do you bring the connection back to the whole? Well, the diagnosis of cancer is like the first thing that just completely isolates everything. All of a sudden, every cell of your body is in a, hide under the bed kind of, oh my God, this is the worst case fight or flight, situation. And when you're in a fight or flight situation, the body isn't rebuilding. It isn't repairing. It's getting up a tree to save your life. And, it's like when you have a fire in your house, the firemen, they break doors down. They don't pick the lock. They just do whatever it takes to put the fire out, and it's degenerative. So we want to get the body into a parasympathetic state where it can deeply rebuild and rejuvenate, right? That's what we're shooting for, is deep, deep rejuvenation. So how do you do that? Well, there's so many Ayurvedic tools, and I don't have time to do them all, but I'll give you some basics. Even just simply putting oil on your skin as a daily Ayurvedic massage. I've got over 20 million sensory receptors on my arm alone. If I put oil on it, it calms that sensory experience. And also my nervous system becomes calm. I put it all over my whole body becomes calm. And when my body becomes calm, the lake becomes still. And when the lake becomes still, the body can be more self-aware. It can see at the bottom of the lake. There's tires down there, there's old junk down there. There's things in there that have to be addressed. So the body can therefore begin to become more self-aware, recognize problems as problems and begin to heal them. If I cut my finger and I have a scab, my body feels the pain, recognizes the problem as a problem, and it puts a scab and heals. I don't think scab, 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 scab. It has nothing to do with your mind and your thinking per se. It has to do with something a little bit deeper than that. It's a feeling of that pain. And the feeling of stress can have that negative downward spiraling effect on your immune system. So we're going to kind of dive into this a little bit more as we dig into this. It's really important. So other ways to do it in Ayurveda, yoga, breathing, meditation. I wrote an article on how meditation is a biohack for the stress and rev and constant incoming, that we have in this culture. We're a go, 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 go culture, unlike any other culture in the history of mankind. Think about our native ancestors who lived in, deep forests, entrained with the natural rhythms of nature, in resonance with these beautiful cycles of nature. They were just lived such a calm, still life. Seemed boring, and probably to us it is boring, but the idea they were in harmony and they were in rhythm. They had a natural silence about them. They were living in the eye of the storm. Living in the winds of the storm is dangerous, and that's where we live today. Constantly going, constantly worrying, constantly going, constantly. But if you can meditate, you can still the nervous system. It's a biohack. It takes the crazy stress of this culture and puts you into a deep old growth forest and gives you that calm. Right? That's the beauty of meditation. And it creates that inner calm, that inner stillness, that inner clarity where the body can recognize problems as problems, right? And that's the beauty. And now studies are showing that if you can actually introduce intention at that deep level, and I wrote articles about this when we talk about biophotons, which are ultra-weak photon emissions coming out of your DNA, that can be coherent. When you meditate, yoga, and breathe, they become coherent, and they carry information when they're coherent, or they can be incoherent, released out of your DNA emissions of biophotons, and that's because of DNA damage, and they don't carry information. So if you create stillness, the photon emissions become still. And when they become still, they carry information. And some studies show they carry intention. So if you can create a situation where you can create silence and then create intention, magical things happen. And this is actually something called guided imagery. And guided imagery is powerful. I interviewed a PhD researcher, Sam Watts, recently. He wrote a book called The Ayurvedic Approach to Cancer. And he talked about some of the benefits, so some of the Ayurvedic approaches to cancer. And I was really quite impressed with this book. And I did a podcast interview with him. I invite you to watch that. And if you're watching this on my website, you can get that podcast interview. You can also get all of our articles at LifeSpa.com. We have over 1,500 articles and videos on ancient wisdom and modern science at LifeSpa.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter, get this information on a regular basis. Check out our Ayurvedic store with all our organic herbs and books and everything there as well. Of course, if you're watching this on a social channel, just please subscribe and like and follow our content. Okay, so let's talk about the guided imagery, the idea of creating a situation where you're still and attentive at the same time, where you can actually create an effect. So I want to cite some science. There's a Dr. Simonton who did research. He was an oncologist back in the 1980s and 90s. And he was astute enough to see that the folks who lived the longest with their cancer diagnosis actually were more positive and happy and giving and caring. And they didn't let the diagnosis change their attitude. It's sort of like what I experienced. The ones that did better, they changed their attitude for the positive as a result of letting the cancer diagnosis create a negative experience. So he saw that, and he actually did a study on guided imagery, positive reinforcement. You get that cancer diagnosis, you're going to need something to antidote that mindset. That mindset is going to be hard to kind of push back that tide of negative thinking, right? Because we know from Candace Pert's work that's going to have an impact on your mind and your mood and your nervous system and your immunity. It's all going to crash. And we want that to happen. We need that. We need your immune system more than ever at this point in time. So he did a study with 159 cancer patients who were so terminal that they had 12 months to live. It was a 4-year study, and they gave them guided imagery on a regular basis, which is positive reinforcement in a really settled state. So you have the stillness, you can see the bottom of the lake, you can see problems as problem. Now you're initiating thoughts, you're initiating intention, which can be carried by those photons of light that are being emitted out of your DNA that could carry intention and actually create a healing response. I wrote many articles on biophotons. I wrote what are called ultra-weak photon emissions. I wrote articles on quantum entanglement, which is the mechanism of how all that happens, if you want to dig deeper into the metaphysics of all this. But here's what happened in that study. In this guided imagery study by Dr. Simonton, found that out of the 159 cancer patients with 12 months to live in a 4-year study, 22.2% of them had a full recovery. 19.1% had a significant decrease in their disease. 27.1% saw their disease stabilize with no particular growth, and 31% of them had more progression of their disease. So, again, asking that question, is that placebo or is it spontaneous remission? Well, it probably doesn't really matter because the placebo is more powerful than you think. They had to create an entire kind of study to actually rule out the impact of the placebo, called a randomized placebo-controlled study or a double-blind study, which means that, that some people got the placebo, some people didn't, and no one knew what they actually got. So here's a study on migraine headaches. And they measured 79 different studies. And they found that the placebo decreased the migraine headaches 22% when they just took a placebo pill, a sugar pill. When they gave them a fake acupuncture treatment, it reduced their migraine by 38%. When they gave them the fake surgery, they sedated them, they gave them a surgery, or they didn't give them a surgery, the fake surgery reduced their migraine headaches by 58%. In another meta-analysis evaluating an FDA-approved antidepressant medication, they found that 82% of the folks in the clinical trial felt better from the placebo, sometimes matching and sometimes actually even beating out the benefits of the drug itself. Studies also show that that some of these clinical trials, if they beat the placebo, if the drug beats the placebo just one time in a clinical trial, it can be approved as a drug according to the FDA. That's how powerful the placebo effect is. And our mind has everything to do with how well we can actually enhance that immune pharmacy that we have. And to get it, you've got to be able to see the bottom of the lake so the body can recognize the problem as a problem. And that's done by creating a regular experience of yoga, breathing, meditation, stilling your nervous system, doing things to antidote this chronic incoming of stress and overwhelm that we're all having to face in this modern culture. All right, please take some time, read this article. It's really quite amazing research, and there's so many other articles that are associated with this knowledge that I hope to share with you and help you or those who are struggling during these times. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. John Douillard. Hi everybody, I just want to take a minute and tell you what we do here at LifeSpa.com. I've been in practice now for 40 years, 38 of them have been practicing Ayurvedic medicine full-time. For the last 20 years, I've been writing articles and doing videos on the ancient medical wisdom of Ayurveda with the modern science. If something's been around for 1,000 years, still practiced today, and you have modern science to prove it, boy, I really feel like that's something we should all be taking a look at. And that's what we do at LifeSpa.com, and all that information is for free. So just go to LifeSpa.com and search in your health topic, and you'll get the information, the article that you need, hopefully that will help you. While you're there, check out our Ayurvedic store. You can get there through LifeSpa.com or go to store.lifespa.com. And there we have all of our organic Ayurvedic herbs, organic skincare line, more books, tapes, knowledge that we give you is all there at our store. All of our cleansing kits are there in our store. All of our herbs are whole herbs with the natural occurring microbiome, the way it came out of the soil. And that's critically important because if I took the bugs out of you, you'd be completely different. We take the bugs away from a plant, like sterilizing and making an extract or spraying your food with pesticides, you lose significant benefit of that plant. And that's why we use the whole plant with the natural occurring microbiome. So check us out, learn more about what we're doing here at LifeSpa.com, and we'll see you again.
This recording is brought to you by LifeSpa, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Get access to free health video newsletters by Dr. John at LifeSpa.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.